Which is the main camera?
Boom, boom, bada, bang, pow.
Hello, everyone. Today, I am joined by two guests who you have probably seen around this channel, these streets, if you're a long-time listener of the... Okay, sorry. The podcast. What are Mauritius people called? Mauritanians.
Yeah.
For Mauritius,
Mauritanians.
national ID.
Mauritanians.
No, we're not.
You know what? Mauritanians, please comment. Correct.
Correct
Mauritians.
us.
Okay, I don't know.
Actually,
Mauritania, I think
It's its own country.
Mauritania is its own country. You made me change my statement. Weekly. Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of not the My Tech, is it the My Tech Story Africa podcast, but a micro segment which we call the Tech Roundtable discussion, and we are having the June Roundup. Today, I am joined by two guests that you are probably familiar with if you're a regular listener of the My Tech Story Africa podcast. These were actually my first two guests of the podcast, and I'm very excited to have them join us for the June Roundtable discussion, where we just highlight the stuff that's been happening, whether that's in tech news, the political landscape, or just economically across Africa and beyond. So today, I am joined by Dominique Mulinda and Evans Munene, who I'll give a chance to introduce themselves. But one more thing, please subscribe from wherever you're listening from. If you're listening on YouTube, on Spotify, or any of the major listening platforms, your support means the world. And this roundtable discussion is actually inspired by our MTS monthly roundup newsletters that go out every single month. We just did one, and we're going to be touching on some of the topics that we're going to discuss today. But please subscribe to our newsletters as well at mtsafrica.co/join, or you can simply click the link that is going to be in the description. Guys, it's time for you guys to introduce yourself. Oh, I'm Alice Kanjajo, by the way, host and moderator of this conversation. Go ahead.
All right. You want to do it?
Hello, everyone. I am Evans Munene, a software engineer and entrepreneur. It's a very heavy word.
You want to give more context, Evans?
Not really. Okay. I think I'm happy with that context. I'm very happy to be here, and I can't wait for us to have this discussion.
Dominique, who is now currently my co-host of this segment. Welcome back. Introduce yourself.
Thank you. Well, I hail by the name Dominique. I'm a humble co-host at MTS. But also my vocation by day is...
what is this lingo we are using today?
I am the chief product officer or the head of product at a company called Honeycoin. And what I do by night is confidential.
None of our business.
Yes, nobody was asking Dom, I promise you.
I'm joking. Please cut that off. Put it in the bloopers. Forget about it.
So today we have a variety of topics that we would love to dive deep into. But before we get into that, guys, Mkwache, how was your week? I know it's been a tough month emotionally, given the political landscape in Kenya. But how are you guys doing? What caught your attention?
Well, I think I could go first. My week has been good. The month has been intense as well. I think maybe if I could say the most recent thing that's caught my attention right now is the president's X space that happened yesterday. And I think yesterday was 4th of... when?
Today we are on the 6th of July.
Yeah, so 5th of
July.
Yeah, so that was quite interesting. That's probably been one of the most interesting
what
things
caught your
I've
attention
seen
there?
This week. Yeah.
What caught your attention about?
So I'd say first of all, it's just a different phenomenon when it comes to the leadership in this country. No president.
Even just globally, really.
Yeah, I think even globally. But I think globally, there's a bunch of presidents who've engaged their people on X. But getting that here in our local context, also considering the fact that Kenyans are like the second most tweeting Africans.
Yes,
it was quite interesting to just have the president come on in the space and have that kind of format of interrogation, which is very different from, manicured interviews that probably he has really long-winded and really well-prepped answers to. So I think this was a really interesting format to see a president engage in, and I'd like to see more of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was quite
I think it
interesting.
was very raw, authentic, guys coming on the mic saying what they want to say with their chest, and him taking it and responding. Of course, very politically correct, but he's the president. And there was a moment right before the Twitter space started, actually, we're listening to it in the office, where he was prepping, and I don't think they knew that the mic was on. So he was asking, so how many jobs? 20,000 jobs.
200,000.
200,000. Okay. Don't,
But maybe all of them do that. Allegedly. But he has the facts on hand.
Yeah, so that is a good thing to have caught your attention, man. I rate it as well. I think it was a very unique outlook towards how to engage with the youth. But to be fair, it was the platform to use because that's where a lot of the Gen Z who have become a buzzword are located for their finance bill debacle, which we'll get into in the episode. Evans?
For me, I ran the risk of sounding out of touch, and I probably am anyway. So, but I just came from getting married and
we're not hearing the last of it.
Yeah, and so to be honest, I'm not here.
We're seeing you.
I'm trying to be on the ground, but I'm really not. I'm just adjusting to this new lifestyle. So you'll forgive me if I don't know. I'm not keeping up to date.
That's perfectly fine.
The one thing that has been on my mind, honestly, was actually Xbox and Game Pass, because when I saw it, and I was okay. Like I said, I've just been trying to settle into this new life, and mostly just it involved a lot of leisure. And in my mind, as I saw it, I was like, someone is getting the short end of the stick in this engagement, because I mean, much the same way we talk about Spotify, Netflix, and all other streaming services. You really think that someone is losing, but as I was reading up, the impression I got was that.
Sorry, before you continue, I think there's a bit of context that maybe me and some other people who are listening might not have on what that means.
Game Pass.
Yeah. So Game Pass is Microsoft's Netflix for games service. A subscription where you pay, in my case, it's like $20 a month, and you get to play as many games as are on Game Pass monthly. Interesting.
We should add that, by the way, for gamers. Man, because PSN, PlayStation Network, is a very competing ecosystem to
That's
Game Pass.
Actually really
and I'm on PSN, and I have thoughts.
You have thoughts. We're not going to get too deep into that. But
the growing sentiment around a lot of these streaming services that there's someone who's losing, there's someone who isn't getting their fair share. Mm-hmm. And so I was trying to find out who, what's going on, how does it look like? Mm-hmm. And some of the sentiments that I got, I didn't do a lot of research, but the sentiment that I was getting to see, or the picture that was being painted, was it seems to be somehow working, and game developers are trying their best to join on that Game Pass. Yeah, so I'll try to find out more, but it just stood out to me as, could this be different?
Are you convinced?
I'm trying to find out why that would be the case.
Interesting.
Are you convinced that
I don't know.
Change is coming?
I was very bullish on Game Pass when it came out. I thought it would probably overhaul like PlayStation, the PlayStation dominance. But I think there's a very intricate balance between the hardware and the software, at least at this point in time. But I think Game Pass was such a killer move for Microsoft, at least in the gaming space.
Microsoft is really integrating themselves well in different.
Yeah, and for me, PSN, I find PSN to be more expensive and a bit more limiting, because for PlayStation Network, you can pay for the subscription, but really the games that you really want, you can only get like maybe a few hours of gameplay or like a pre-release version of it to play. But really the games that you would really want to play, you still have to go ahead and buy them. You still have to buy the individual titles. So it's a bit more, it's a more expensive ecosystem compared to Game Pass. Because for the $20 in Game Pass, you literally have all the games on multiple devices. In fact, I think we had this debate because he's an Xbox stan and I'm a
you
PS5
guys are really
stan.
You're gamers.
And, well, they are more hardcore gamers than us.
Not really,
sure.
but we just like to hold strong opinions that are often diametrically opposed to each other.
Yes, that's
often diametrically opposed to each other is such a, I don't know, corporate lingo way to put it.
Sorry, I'll rephrase. Dominic has very terrible taste, and it's my duty for myself and society to ensure that his level of
Guys, that's an Xbox guy speaking. Anyway, we move on.
So that might be our segue,
start.
cue to now get into the deep dive. Deep dive. Spanish now. The deep dive of the agenda of today's discussion. We had touched on a bit slightly when we talked about the Kenyan president being on X, that being one of the topics that we're going to be covering. But we're going to try do things a bit different today. Okay, we're trying a different format. So we're going to because the last roundtable discussion we had was a bit chaotic. Everyone's opinion, left, right, center. Dominique and Tony could not stop speaking at the right times. So today we're trying things different just to make sure that we're covering as much ground as possible and keep this as informative as possible. So we are going to be setting up timers.
Yes.
So 15 minutes for topic of discussion. We're trying it out and we're going to have an alarm that goes off every 15 minutes just so we keep tabs on this. So yeah, Dominique, do you think you can handle just...
I'm a disciplined boy.
Minimizing your thoughts.
Yes.
Yeah.
Concise, straight to the point.
Okay, so Evans is going to be our time manager here. So you can go ahead and start the first 15 minutes. So the first topic of discussion is the Kenyans' Gen Z digital era shift as they use digital activism to spur change. Now, this is information that I'm gathering from our newsletter. The debacle started when the Kenyan finance bill was being rejected after it was proposed. And, there was a lot of, what's the word for it? Cashback. No, what's not cashback?
Pushback.
Thank you. There was a lot of pushback from Kenyans against the finance bill, and the hashtags that were being used, hashtag reject finance bill, hashtag occupy parliament, were being pushed very heavily on X. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because, of course, X, being a social media platform, has a lot of grounding to talk about things to do with tech. There are a lot of implications that came into this, but there was also a lot of tech integration that was being done during these protests. The hashtag reject finance bill. I was literally watching that fateful Thursday. I don't remember the date. 23rd. Was it the Thursday when everything went, when people actually occupied parliament? The hashtag reject finance bill 2024 from the morning, it started gaining traction. 1 million, 2 million. By the end of that single day, we had over 5 million people having used the hashtag reject finance bill 2024. If you were in Europe, if you were in the US, you probably saw it in your timeline. You were seeing people from different parts of Kenya, the world, even going to protest out there. So, all this to say that, Gen Z, or I wouldn't even say it was Gen Z. I think Gen Z was being used as a buzzword, even though it started with the Gen Z. This was being used to combat misinformation. We mobilized people. And in terms of tech, even when we get to that, I did a carousel post and talking about the tech implications. And there was literally a ChatGPT built by this guy, Kelvin, let me not butcher his name, Kelvin Demo, who built a ChatGPT that was specifically tailored towards getting information about the finance bill or any questions that you had on it. We had a USSD that people were using to just get more information about what to do, how to do it while you're at the protest. A hashtag, which was the reject finance bill. Database of numbers were being put out of MPs, traitors, organizations. It's a lot, guys.
Yeah.
So that is the topic that I wanted to bring in, man. I think that was last week, but one as well. So not too far back.
Yeah.
What are your sentiments about this whole situation?
I think I'll go first. And again, as I said, I have not been in touch with anything that's been going on, but this was such a momentous thing that no matter how hard you live on a rock, you knew what was going on. And for me, I'm looking at it from specifically the tech point, the tech perspective. And I think one of the hardest things when it comes to technology is user adoption, more so change in behavior. There's usually a very huge gap between when a technology is released vis-a-vis when it goes mainstream, or when it gets to a point where now people adopt it. And sometimes there are big events that tend to, be the catalyst for such changes. And so I'm wondering if this is that moment for technology, or at least technology as Kenyans think about it with regards to activism, or with regards to, effecting social change. because we've had Twitter for a long time. Kenyans have been very active on Twitter for a long time. We've talked about politics, government, and all things. But I think this is the first time where we saw that jump from, hey, these ideas that you read on a screen to people on the street. And so the question that is to be determined, in the weeks and months to come is, was this just a one-off thing, or did it set in motion like a chain reaction where people will actually think of technology not just in terms of this is where I go event or talk about something, but it's a tool that has lasting impact and we can use to effect the change that we want to see. So I'm interested to see how that will look like.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. I think I actually agree with you to that extent. I think I was really more impressed by personally Kevin's work. Props to the guy, man. Props to the guy for doing the finance GPT and for maintaining
how
it.
Quick it was.
And maintaining it. Maintaining it is also a very critical part because even with the evolution of the finance bill before it even got to parliament, like the revisions that were done by the parliament, the finance parliamentary committee, and the way they say that they took off things and they took off like a lot of clauses and we are good to go now. You could still debunk that. The way previously, I think digital activism makes more sense right now because it's a nexus of technologies. It's not just like one single platform. I mean, we have ChatGPT on one end, literally simplifying a document that our forefathers were always just passive about. Bills are being passed in this country. Bills are being passed in many nations and many states. Digital activism now has a different face because number one, you accurately pinpointed the demographic is obviously different and more astute and they understand this technology more. Right? You don't need to be a political student or a student of law to just go and literally plug in the whole bill to a GPT and ask it like the main questions. Okay, I earn X amount. What's the financial implication of my salary against this GPT? And then you're like, oh, there's a housing levy. You earn this exact amount. You're going to lose 22,000, let's say, every month to go to some levy that was here because of this act in this particular cap. Now we have solid framing. You can apply this context directly to your mom and your dad. And that's what was actually happening. Guys were translating their understanding of the finance bill in their own mother tongues for even like the older generations and folks who aren't directly involved, let's say, because they're not Gen Z or millennial or whatever the case that may be. So I think I was more impressed by the whole nexus of technologies that came into play in this particular situation. I was really impressed by how it's the dissemination of information right now it's quite spectacular when you think about it. Like things that were previously being hidden. And the way they always say, they had this common phrase, like if you want to hide anything from a Kenyan, put it in writing. Bro, now you can put it in writing and we have AI and we bring it out and we pull it out and we now prompt it to simplify, no legalese, no fluff, just common speak, simple language, and you can be able to understand something that is quote unquote very complex. And I think that for me is like a really huge shift forward in terms of even what digital activism is going to look like.
My question to you guys is, do you think it's more a factor of the technology being good or people's change in perception towards technology? Because I could easily argue that information proliferation has been, we've always had access to a lot of information for a long time. But is it more that the technology has now made it easier for people to access this information? Or is it more, and that's actually what I'm leaning towards, that it's more of like an aha moment societally where
I think both of them can coexist. Technology has evolved. I mean, we have Twitter Spaces, which was a feature that wasn't there even maybe 2 years ago. We have ChatGPT AI that, was existing, but not in this form. So yes, the technology has evolved, but previously we would have a aha moment and you're not really sure about what the next steps are going to look like. This time, it's almost that, that common saying of opportunities when luck meets preparation. It's almost like the same kind of analogy that I'm putting here. It's like the technology was already evolving and then that aha moment met it, and we're able to now use what we have and now get all that information that we require. I think also that willingness of people to be more involved, it needed to be a really big aha moment. Yeah. And now I think that the change has started. Now people are more, before this, me knowing about what a lot that was happening in politics truthfully, and a lot of people within my generation weren't really keen on what's happening. But now this gave us a huge opportunity to really look down on what are the things that are happening in our country, what are the policies that are there, this politician, this, that. So it wasn't that the technology was good, but it was because the technology has been evolving, and now we are able to plug ourselves into that. I
actually lean more as well into the aha moment, because when I think about the drivers of this movement, even as it were, it's a couple of really big names, really big quote unquote names in terms of influencers who started actually telling people like, hey, there's an issue here. And they made it a matter of public interest. And you know, the way a lot of people I think even in most nations and economies or states or whatever block are usually like in the passive majority segment. And it takes like a very fringe niche of people who are considered to be like thought leaders to like speak up, and then they just drive the interest to a particular issue. So I think that was the first case, because the way I think about it, it was like a series of like, you know, like small like stones beginning to gather like a lot of momentum, because it was one influencer coming out and saying, oh yeah, there's something wrong here. And then they started saying all the highlights about like, okay, what's really bad about this bill? Yeah. And then two others, and then three others, and then some tech guy somewhere does a GPT. You know what? Actually take all the information, and then it just now begins to like get its own, like it really picked up its own life. So it's definitely an aha moment, I think. It was more, but where the passive majority, like a lot of guys who would naturally never get into political activism, like actually gain enough interest to be bothered and to actively participate now. Okay, now we want to protest. We want to picket. It's a democratic right. Yeah. There's a lot of things here we don't agree with, because now I see how it affects me. And I think for me, I'd say, I think the protests were good, regardless of the situation. I'm not talking about the rightness or the wrongness of the bill per se, but I think the protests were good in terms of like just that awakening, that policing, that the actual. The vibration is gonna be hard. Yeah, the actual policing that the general masses could hold their leadership to account. You know, like they cannot now just get away with anything. And I think for me, I hope there's a lasting impact because of it, but again, that stands to be seen with time.
Yeah, the jury's still out on that.
The jury's still out. It could be the zeitgeist of the moment, but we need to really last.
We hope that it is a lasting effect. And actually, you've brought up that conversation of the good, and there's a lot of good things that came out of this. You know, the mobilization of people. You know, it's almost like guys said, "Fuck off" in terms of tribalism. In terms of we are here for the bill. There was a lot of. I think there was mostly good than bad. In fact, I don't think there was anything bad out of this. No, there. What I'm trying to say is I want to bring in the conversation of the bad, or just the implications on what we need to look out for in terms of social media usage as we go along. And, you know, we've had cases before of mobilization, not so much for the good or people's perceptions being changed for the good, because your algorithm is always going to affirm your biases, because that's what, you know, they've built systems to kind of do. But we had cases of time and time again, we've talked about this, Cambridge Analytica, which had a direct effect on how people's, you know, narratives or algorithms were tailored towards being biased towards certain political parties. It happened in Kenya, it happened in India, or just changing opinions overall. So I know time is about to run out, but in uni, I did a research on the attitudes of university students towards regulations that govern social media narratives. And things that came out of that research study is that, one, yes, there could be regulations, but two, not many people even know about them. And three, should we really start thinking about what this could start meaning as we keep... It's like every time something happens, it's like another implication, and there might be a time where things... you know, boil over. So I'm really curious to know what your opinions are about, you know, regulation. Meta has gotten so many fines right now. It's in the EU. It's currently in court for, you know, not subscribing to advertising policies by the DMA. So I'm just curious to know if you guys have that same fear as I do, that this was good, but the negatives can be really, really bad, especially in behavioral change.
Okay, I think technology is amoral. it does not decide what's good or what's wrong.
bad.
It's just
It
a
just
medium.
amplifies.
But the real question is, or rather the underlying issue here for me is, again, if you're having like such social quote revolution, though it's may not count as revolution yet, but that sense of, social unrest, they're demanding things that, are not going to be given to them on a silver platter, or we're demanding things that we know are not just going to be given directly with ease. And so I think it involves that bit of really looking and deciding, is it the things that we're doing when you go to protest, there's a risk tied with it, and you many people are making the judgment that, hey, it's worth me getting injured.
It's really dying.
It's worth me dying.
It's the cross you're willing to.
And most tough decisions often come from that point of, there's something that you're risking.
Yeah.
To get there.
I
So
think
you're
it's
saying the
where-
responsibility lies on the individual.
I think where rubber meets the road is the skin in the game part. When now you are called upon, okay, you've seen these things and you actually have to go to the ground and you actually have to go and protest, or you actually have to do the good work. And this may be like even a calling card for tech bros and people of goodwill. How can we actually build something? Okay, yeah, time. But as I wrap up, maybe like it's a calling card for, can we really take these conversations and do the hard work behind it that it takes? If you're a tech bro, can we come together? Can we build some open source project that is gonna have a lasting change? And there are guys who are already doing it in certain spaces, like, so I think for me, that's where really lasting change is gonna eventually come out of.
That was a really good conversation, actually. But I know time has gone off. I don't know if this is a separate topic, but still
It's kind of
in
the same,
line.
though. It's still the same. We can even
Do we-
just do 5 minutes maybe.
Okay, add 5 minutes to the timer.
5 minutes.
Yes,
Oh, okay. 5 or 10. But it should be quick. I
5.
think.
Five. All right, we were gonna get into the M-changa. This was just inspiring the conversation we're about to have, but we saw that citizens of Kenya were able to, for medical bills alone, Kenyans raised over $155,000. That's 20 million Kenyan shillings in less than a week. Dominique, when we were speaking, you had said that 30 million as of today. M-changa is basically a platform that people use to, what's changa in Kiswahili? In English?
Contribute.
Fun.
To contribute funds together for a particular cause. It's almost like you were saying a baby version of GoFundMe. But we were curious to talk about the business side of it. There were complaints that, again, on X, we were seeing people saying that, yes, we were raising all this money, but the profit that M-changa is taking home from this, the transaction cost is a bit high. People worried about, is this actually cost effective, or should we be using other platforms? And I think when we're talking to Evans, I think this would be really good for you to also chime in, given your experience working at Chums, which almost offers a similar service. How Kenyans are able to monetize, digital products like these, and wanted to know what you guys think there.
Yeah, I think looking at the numbers that M-changa hit really goes to show you the power of software. The biggest advantage that software has over any other product is distribution.
Scale.
The fact that you can collect money from 1 million, 10 million, 1 billion people at once without having to put in so much investment in terms of that facility, facilitating that exchange really shows the power of software, the distribution. But the challenge that we have, and this is, I think, from my experience working, at Chums, and from what I see in the tech landscape here in Kenya, is that that finding the right business model is hard. I think from our experience, we found that charging people like direct for accessing a service, like subscriptions don't do all that well. I know Spotify and Netflix, and there's a lot of subscriptions that are becoming more and more common, but for many things, people are very cost conscious, especially when it comes to software.
Yeah.
And so honestly, many companies are trying to find that, that tightrope where you want to offer a service. Most of the time you're offering a freemium where it's free to join, and then once you're doing a transaction is when the company tries to get some of that value. But it's very hard because, actually, in this case, we're looking at it from the point of view you're trying to service a noble cause. So we can't have, it's the same criticism that's thrown against like non-profits. a lot of the money you're receiving might be going to salaries or something, and so people feel like, if it's philanthropic in nature, then majority of it should be going to the cause. But M-changa is a business. It needs to make money, so they trying to find that sweet spot where they can offer service that people are willing to use and still put the lights on, or make it an endeavor that's worthwhile for them. It's really hard.
Yeah, I mean, just the nature of our own payment stack in this country, it's extremely convoluted. Like there are so many basis points that we lose just moving money between different entities. So even when you think about it, just begin to break it down in your head. There's a mobile money aspect. There's a payment fee that will go to Safaricom. There's a payment fee that probably is going to involve like a bank payout or a bank deposit. There's a payment fee as well, some basis points that are going to be lost by M-changa having to, as you said, and correctly so, like, compensate them for the service that they're giving, albeit it's a matter of public interest, So like the traditional payment stack is at this point we're probably losing between, normally in Kenya, I think I'd say currently we're probably looking at between 100 to maybe 400 basis points, 1 to 4% give or take, normally in transaction value is usually lost just to move the money. And that's why I think we still need to keep, like for us guys who are involved in fintech, we still need to keep building in the space. We still need to keep optimizing. We still need to look for solutions where we're reducing the middleware, we're reducing the people who have to come in between for the settlement and the clearance aspect of these transactions to actually happen.
So would you say that I just want to also just touch
it's not free for them.
What are some of the reasons, the justifications for the transaction cost? I mean, of course, there's
one. I'd say I'm not in M-changa, I'm probably not affiliated with them, so I don't know if I can speak for them, but just from an outsider's view looking in, I'd say the OPEX cost for M-changa already there, inbuilt by the nature of the business they're having. Maybe they are not the ones holding custody of the funds, it's being held with the bank. There's a fee that will be applied in the bank transactions that are there. There'll be a fee that will be applied with Safaricom and the mobile money provider, because Safaricom also, we all know, has a transaction rate that they have to levy on every payout. And then you have to think about, I guess, the scale of this payout. For instance, it's 30 million, and I know they were paying to hospitals, and these are bills like 150,000, often exceeding like the limits for that M-Pesa wallets can hold. So they're probably like some ad hoc payments that involve banking rails, and those are usually again more expensive, because if it's Momo to bank, there's already like some interchange fees that will have to go in between. So like I really can't fault them. I just know it's like the current nature of the payment stack as it is. I think what I'd be more curious about, especially for M-changa, is the way they have like extreme transparency with inflows of cash. Like, and it's similar to GoFundMe. We need to have some semblance of the same in outflows, like in real time. I think that's hard work to do, but as the money came in, especially for matters of such public interest, the accountability for it, while you can say, I'll come back and give you audited statements after a month, it's not satisfactory. Because if I can see real-time transactions coming in, I want to see the transactions going out. I want to see, 150,000 plus fees went out to KNH. 150,000, and that's it's possible to do. I mean, blockchains do this, but I don't know. That's a different conversation for another day. But still, we can get that level of accountability as well in outflows, and I think that will make for a really cool product. But
I mean, kudos to them for the software as well, not breaking.
It's at their discretion to decide. Being a private business, but I think you want to disclose. At the end of the day, you're the one who has a product. You put it out. People will decide whether, and if they don't like how you're operating, the beauty of business is that someone else can be more transparent.
So I can come today and build an M-changa that's transparent in and out. But I mean,
in terms of accountability, just to mention that the lovely Hanifa, her username on Twitter, Hanifa Safi has actually been giving regular updates in terms of accounting for how the funds were being used. So far we're seeing that, there was a bit of rest when, she gives these updates. So we've not really had anyone complaining that, my money didn't really go here. But you never really know when it comes to charity and things like this. You just have to hope for the best.
It's a difficult position to be in.
Difficult position to be in. And, on this podcast, we do have soft spot for fintechs. So we're really and payments. So we're hoping that we are able to create solutions that can at least have the customer have more ease when it comes to making transactions. We brought in the conversation of Safaricom. And that just happens to be our next topic of discussion. I know we are diving a lot still about this whole reject finance bill extravaganza, but we have to bring in the conversation on the mobile network debacle. Now, if you don't know, during this time when that fateful Thursday, which I think was the 23rd, please correct me if I'm wrong, but we had a moment where, Parliament was occupied. There was the hashtag Occupy Parliament. It was occupied. We were seeing TikTokers doing their whole thing. The whole demonstrations were going on. But at some point, we noticed that our networks all of a sudden were not working. We're sending tweets. The tweets are not going. Trying to make calls. Calls were the only things that were working. But there was an internet shutdown, basically. And at this time, Safaricom issued a statement. It went out for hours after protesters occupied Parliament. I'm reading from our newsletter. Safaricom was shut down and the statement said that it was shut down due to an undersea cable cut, which happens to have gone back on less an hour or so later, And what was interesting to me during this time, it strategically happened during a time where there was media monitoring. So when you go on NTV, when you're going on KTN, the regular news stations, they're no longer showing live updates of what's happening in Parliament. So we're just seeing presenters and we want to see what's happening. At the same time, we're seeing internet has been shut down. At the same time, abductions, we're hearing of abductions happening. Don't shoot the messenger. But yeah, that to me was very interesting to me. And I wanted to also just think, moving further down this conversation, what are the dangers of then, when Safaricom is shut down, it means like almost the whole of Kenya is shut down because they have the biggest mobile network that people use. Yeah. So do you think that there was political interference involved? What are the dangers that are involved with Safaricom or a monopoly, quote unquote, having so much power? And, do you think competition has a chance? But we can get into that after you guys give your thoughts.
Wanna go?
This situation, I think, really goes to highlight just the fragile nature of, I don't say third world economies, emerging markets, where you find that a lot of core services are provided mostly by single entities, many of which are controlled by state controlled because if you think about it from the point of even just basic needs, electricity is provided by one organization.
That is true.
Right? Our water, if you're not getting the lorries coming to your house, and it really just goes to emphasize how much our system, even though on top of the veneer of just how efficient it might look, fortunately, I don't think in Nairobi we think so much about will we have power. They sometimes they get power outages, but we expect that to be the exception and not the rule. And oftentimes you expect that networks will always be on and internet will always run and water will always be coming. But it only goes to show how much of that comes at the loss of control. How much little control we have over the infrastructure, that we run on. Even in the case where it goes beyond government-provided services to what we look at as private entities. Because in this case, we're talking about internet going down, and Safaricom is a private entity, and still goes to show. And as well as you've mentioned, monopolies. The fact that monopolies give you the benefit in that they often will give you lower costs. They'll give a lot of services bundle in, a lot of benefits for a lower price, but it comes at the cost of control. I can't wake up just today and decide to switch to another phone number. A lot of my contacts or all that I do. If you think about it, my connection to the internet, my mobile money, my communication with other people is tied to one organization.
Slowly but surely.
And so it's more. It is in moments such as this that you really get to see how fragile.
Making a decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I agree with you to a huge extent there. I think a couple of things I'd like to point out and just add on to that whole debacle is that NetBlocks, like the guys who monitor undersea cables, came out with a tweet almost immediately after Safaricom said they were experiencing that undersea cable cut, to kind of dispute the fact that, hey, by the way, from our point of view, we're not seeing it. But anyway, that goes to show, very interesting things. I think the one thing that kind of crossed my mind at that point in time was, wow, His Excellency Elon Musk has been talking about Starlink. Looks like an interesting proposition right now, Actually, and or I've never looked at. Funny thing is, I'd never considered JTL as an ISP, like Jamii Telecom Fiber, as another alternative internet service provider, until that day. And when I went and saw their pricing page, I was like, thank God for competitive capitalism. I may have found someone new to, give a chance to. But you see, there's some fundamental truths here, even just with regards to this specific entity we've been really talking about, who's quote unquote the big tech in Kenya. Like, when your company is 35%, owned by the government, there's a strong case to be made for maybe, some might argue, some semblance of regulatory capture. Some might argue, like, probably making it difficult to compete. Because, when you look at companies like Airtel, as you pointed out, they have a very huge and expansive 5G network. But you see, I kind of find it very difficult to be in the place of a company like Airtel, because, hey, the government is both your regulator and technically your competitor. Like, you see, like, how do you even the playing field in that kind of situation? And I'm not a big Milton Friedman fan, but I resonate a lot with some of the things that he says. And I remember coming across this quote, and I wanted to just kind of bring it up. He says, the kind of economic organization that provides economic freedom directly, namely competitive capitalism, also promotes political freedom because it separates economic power from political power. And in this way, one offsets the other. And it's a fine line. It's a fine line in any society that when the biggest, most controlling, most important companies and institutions in your economy have government control, it's very telling of an emerging market, by the way. And it's very telling of an economy that's still burgeoning, and I pray that, we either begin to transition our economy to like more privatized companies and more companies that grow in economic power to offset political power, because it kind of checks itself. It provides some checks and balances. But then competitive capitalism is good on paper. It's very difficult on the ground. I think this is one of the things that came up from the last conversation as well we had with Tony, and I think he pointed it out quite clearly, how like it's easy to say it, but on the ground, lobbying is a reality and things like that. Like they always find a way to try and win one over the other. Yeah. So,
and if I can piggyback off what you said, because I remember, I think on that Tuesday, when we were having the internet outages, something else about I had people saying that, hey, just make sure your laptops are charged, your phones are charged, because you never know. You might just.
Sad.
And the fact that we had that and we knew it could very well be true. Yeah. That could very well happen. Again, just goes to show how much of the things that are quite vital. Electricity at this point is.
I was really looking at, because
basic need,
I was scrolling on Twitter like the entire time, and it's just you sit down and work, like, wow, what is happening out there right now?
Yeah.
And that was a very scary situation. But I guess maybe my follow-up question then would be, what are some of the things that someone who is, or startups that maybe are looking, should they even be looking, like, what can competitors do to try and have a footing in the area? I know Airtel is expanding its 5G networks. It's been going on that run for a while now, and they're trying their best. But what are some of the things that maybe other mobile network providers can do to kind of have their piece of the pie? Or is this just already, we can say that this has been taken over? I
don't think as an entrepreneur you're allowed to, you're allowed to give up when the business you've tried has actually failed. But I think it's the cost of entrepreneurship. You have to do your analysis, but you have to make a bold attempt at trying that enterprise, at trying to get into that, provided you're very confident that you can still compete effectively. You can still get Safaricom on different things. Like, you can still out-edge them on distribution, on your marketing, and you can still out-edge them on maybe how you do your product delivery. Like, one of the biggest things I usually like to think about is the idea of incumbents and the idea of new entrants is like trying to think about a jet ski versus a cruise ship. A cruise ship has to plan like 20, like miles in advance of a turn that it's gonna make at a particular point. But a jet ski, manze, you can just turn at any point in time. And sometimes being big is a disadvantage in and of itself in terms of speed, in terms of adaptability, or the pace at which you can iterate. And being small gives you that advantage. So there's still room for entrants, there's still room for guys coming in to compete. And I truly believe that.
Well, let's see what the future holds. Do you have a point to add on
I have
that
a contrary opinion to
Go for it. Go for it, man.
I kind of agree with what you're saying in terms of what it means for the individual and someone who's trying to do something. If you can carve out an issue for yourself, you should definitely try. Mm-hmm. But I think there's something unique about monopolies and software that in some cases may just make it very impossible for even a new entrant to be able to disrupt
an incumbent.
Yes.
How so?
One, when it comes to software, software is scary in the sense that we said its biggest advantage is distribution, and so typically in normal economics, if I'm selling shoes or cars or whatever, I'm selling a physical product, and so I deal with the economics on the scale of physical goods. It costs me to distribute, to send something somewhere, and so it may be near impossible to have near infinite scale
right
and reach everyone. But that's not the same for software. And so a big company it's like to use that analogy that you use, it's like having a cruise ship that has the same level of agility as the jet ski, because it can just create offshoots that it has a level of maneuverability because of its distribution, not 100% like the jet ski, but to a great extent.
Okay.
For example, I think the one example perhaps I'd use is something like Facebook, where if a new feature, if a new app, a new social app comes up and it has its whole new, the thing that makes it different, it's very easy for Facebook to just see that, add that as a feature. You see what TikTok is doing, turn it into Reels, slap it at the top of your app, and now you're competing with TikTok, except now you have,
within the same distribution.
Again, it's not impossible because TikTok, but you can see how for many other smaller, another perfect example I think would be what Twitter Spaces is now. Remember, it was a whole app.
Clubhouse.
It was Clubhouse. And so, in one move, a company that has the distribution can just add your unique advantage product as a feature. And
should we be okay with that, though?
Yeah,
should we be okay with that?
It's competition.
It's okay.
You can never fault a company for being a monopoly, because it just probably means that they just built a really good product and service that is being
I don't believe there's
where
anything.
Does the line get drawn?
Yeah. I don't believe there's anything wrong with you being a monopoly as long as you're playing.
You're competing.
You're competing by the rules
it's
fairly, as long as it's fair. But the problem comes up when, like in this case, if a company is being majority held by the government, it can be privy to some advantages that many other smaller competitors wouldn't get.
Barriers.
If it was just competing on merit, I have no problem with monopoly. I think the goal of every business is to monopolize the industry and to be the biggest by providing the best value service. And so that was the first thing that I mentioned, that software with its distribution makes it hard for even smaller companies to compete, to carve that edge where it would with other goods, other physical goods. The other thing, again, is monopolies. They have the advantage of bundling, where, to use the case of Slack and Teams, before Slack was acquired, Slack, you had a subscription service for just messaging, whereas Microsoft upon seeing the success of Slack, just build Teams and just bundle it with Office, and now you have both Slack and all the other Office. And again, there's no problem if you're competing fairly, but it just poses a challenge to someone who's trying to take on offering a service that is in competing with a monopoly.
I don't see that as a problem to begin with. I don't see because you're building Zoom and Google could come and do Meets that you shouldn't build Zoom. On the contrary, Zoom was built to the point where it went public. Like the founders got a payout. The early team and the people who built it still got a payout. I think there's nuance to be applied, of course, in that case, but still it's an inherent advantage of being, you see, Zoom still had time to build up, to acquire capital, and to become the company that it was before Google came on, bundled Meet, and of course they have killer distribution, probably outcompeted them again. You see, that's the nature. Like every business technically kind of has a lifespan. We don't know, maybe Google's is 50 years or 100 until we get, what's that Terminator company that came like when AI took. Okay, anyway, you know what? The point is, every company has a lifespan. Just because there's, again, like I'm still kind of going back to the point here. Being like, like Google to do Meet is not it's not a jet ski kind of decision for them. They have to think about implications. They have to think about the strategy for bundling it. So it will take them a much longer build cycle to get to build a Zoom quality level. It's kind of the same reason how OpenAI has been able to creep up over a lot of big tech. I mean, Google still had DeepMind this whole time. But dude, we have Anthropic right now doing cloud. We have OpenAI doing ChatGPT. Like they've been able to have enough time to build big enough modes to still compete. Yeah. So I don't think, while I agree, the obvious advantages like capital, scale, distribution, and in this case maybe local incumbents having government reprieve, are huge barriers to overcome. There's still a very huge opportunity.
It's not impossible.
It's not impossible.
It's not impossible. Yeah, I was just gonna say that even if there's that monopolization, it shouldn't discourage you as a founder, because Dom has shared with us before on this podcast that there are either of two ways that your company, stops being existing. It's either you get acquired, which if you build something really good that a monopoly sees that they want to integrate, they'll probably just buy you out, and it's still a win.
It's still a win for them. It's still a worthwhile effort to build the solution.
Yeah. It's a win at least for you.
Think about it. If you know you could never get that distribution, just I mean, by all means, it was a worthwhile effort to bring
just
that.
Think about how you're gonna do yours. If you're gonna try to do a startup that is gonna compete with a monopoly, and wishing you all the best. Make sure you let us know if you decided to take that leap of faith. All right, alarm went off. Time for us to go to the next discussion. Dominique was very key on this story, which isn't necessarily a news story, but it's definitely something that I want to resurface, because after reading this, I was like, okay, I think we need to just bring it into play. And this happens to be that time when Bill Gates urged President Ruto to implement new digital ID systems for newborns in Kenya. From the article by Cynthia Masibo, she talks about Bill Gates, just exactly what I said in that topic, but this proposal aims to improve access to vital services and healthcare for Kenyan children, enhance government record keeping, and support overall development efforts. Now, I will admit that I didn't do enough research on this, but Dominique was very keen on having this topic of discussion and what the implications are for the healthcare service. And I did get a bit of intel that you do have a bit of experience maybe within that healthcare realm. So I think we've not touched on health tech in this podcast before. So this is
probably a good time. I think maybe a good way to kind of set the stage maybe is even you could tell us your experience in health tech and how you saw unified identity being a plus or a minus, I guess, from your experience. So maybe you can go off and then I can piggyback off of you.
Yeah, so I've had a bit of experience before working with health tech, more so in two specific organizations. One, we were offering support for the Ministry of Health in their management system for information, the DHIS system, So when medical records are collected across medical facilities, there's a level of reporting so that the Ministry of Health could, find out what's going on. And so there was that. But that was never individual. No, it was more aggregate information. But then I also had a chance to work with another nonprofit that supports the use of patients owning their own data. And they were more prevalent in the US. So a patient is able to access their health records from any facility. They have a unified standard called FHIR, F-H-I-R. So that it's basically, just think like JSON, but in a way that we know the structure.
Yeah.
And so patients are able to access their health data, give it if they're going to another facility. So your data is not locked to the facility that did the tests and collected that information. So for them, they said that it was quite important. I don't know if it's government mandated there, but that's what that is the goal with regards to. So the benefit the benefit that they're claiming, of course, is that I get to truly own my information, and so I can go if I need to go somewhere else. It's not locked with any vendor. Yeah. And so I can move with it.
So if I need to go to a new hospital, thereabout, I just go query my data and my whole medical history. I don't have it siloed in one institution or one hospital in that sense. Yeah.
The cons, again, as well, still go back to the privacy and more so control.
Yeah.
If I'm tracked everywhere, then it's a matter of time until either if it's a government entity or like a malicious group, someone who can hack into your records or something. With every decision, we're giving up control for convenience, or the other way around. We decide, I'd rather be inconvenienced, but I maintain that level of control. Right? If I decide to get myself off the grid and put solar panels, now the convenience of just knowing that there's always power I get that inconvenience, but I get control in the sense that no one can shut it off. So for me it's the same. It's the same question. How much control are we willing to give to in such a scenario for the sake of the convenience that it will bring? Is it worth it? In some cases it is. I think some cases it is, but in some cases not.
Would you do it?
The challenge is the worst case scenario. Can we trust our governments? Can we trust other people?
So I'd say for me, just from where I operate, it is worth it. I'm not gonna.
You're always actually about one thing about you. Always you would pay for convenience any day.
Yeah. So I think I really like how Evans, you set the stage, especially in healthcare and that experience, because the moment you presented that as a topic, I went through a journey of first of all breaking down okay. Really, ID, what does ID mean? Identification, right?
Yes.
And so I started asking myself, what really proves that a person exists? Is it that because you were born, or is it that because you're recognized by an external system? And that's a very, I think, philosophical question. Do you exist because the hospital you were born in issued a birth certificate, and thereby you are proven now to be a Kenyan or Dominique Mulinda, existing, born in 2015 in this country? Really, those are the deep questions that I think I began to ask myself. And the first thing about the digital versus the way IDs are issued right now, I thought it was a no-brainer, at least at this point, in the sense where you're still issued external identification one way or another. Only that right now it's extremely inefficient. You could lose your ID. Think about refugees who don't have identification, or all the people who really cannot prove their personhood because of being recognized by an external system. So that's a big question that I felt digital IDs can make a step forward, in solving. I also had a similar concern for privacy versus autonomy. I was hey, how can we maintain some semblance of control over the data that, of course, this externally identifying body actually goes ahead and does that. So I think I looked around and I checked out a couple of solutions, and I found some to be very interesting. One, Microsoft actually has a decentralized project on identity that I found was very dystopian in a sense. But I thought the idea was very noble. And I think that's actually why Bill Gates pitched that proposition
it's all making sense now.
To the president. So, but then again, another interesting project that I came to learn also has approached the question of identity, a bit from a different perspective of universal basic income, is WorldCoin, the blockchain. And so I started going down the rabbit hole of why do these guys look at identity on a decentralized perspective. And I thought that was actually quite interesting.
That's a very interesting.
So I thought maybe this is a topic for a different week or something, that blockchains could really actually come into play a lot in terms of decentralizing like that information and putting personhood. And it's a deep, fundamental philosophical question. You can
How
argue
would decentralization of digital identity
because think about it.
Work?
The last question that Evans stopped with is, would I trust the government to be the one issuing my ID? What about the day you wanna go in on or the day? So the thing about decentralization, in my opinion, is the fact that, hey, first of all, the proof of your personhood will not rest in one single entity. So I think there's a very huge case to be made for my identity can be accessed with my permission. That's another privacy concern, of course, that's there, but it's not really controlled. Like, I don't imagine, like, okay, just peradventure go with this wild example. Some form of biometric scan happens at the point you're born, not just my iris or maybe like my fingerprint. And that is the initial thing that proves my existence, right? And then everything else is just added on, like my birth certificate. It's an extra key property value just added to my JSON object, as you said. You know, like my health records, everything else now is just appended on top of that. And I could go anywhere and I don't have to depend on the government of Kenya being alive or failing for me to prove the fact that I actually exist. I was born here, and that's the kind of now system that in my head makes sense for digital IDs. And I think there are guys who are doing some interesting work. I have qualms with each individual project. Maybe we can get into it later. But I just don't like the Microsoft one in terms of like the enterprise aspect of it, where they still have like a lot of ties to Asia and a lot of enterprise control. It's not really fully decentralized as a system for ID. So those are my big qualms. And for WorldCoin, obviously, I don't really completely agree with UBI being the main focus and having distribution of like income. I don't kind of agree with that fully, but I really like the concept in terms of like the proof of personhood with some form of biometric to issue the identity. So
yeah, I think, you know, if the records are gonna be there digitally, I think there's no way of you losing that information. Okay, let me not say no way. There's less chance of you, or it's easier for you to lose your birth certificate than it would be losing your ID if it's digitized. Actually, I read an interesting story. Another organization that is doing this, Tails, which won a 10-year contract to supply digital ID for Mauritius. For Mauritius, what are Mauritius people called? Mauritanians.
Yeah.
For Mauritius national ID.
Mauritanians.
No, we're not with.
You know what? Mauritanians, please comment. Correct.
Mauritians.
Okay, I don't know.
Actually,
Mauritania, I think
It's its own country.
Mauritania is its own country. Yeah.
Oh, anyway. Mauritania is its own country. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Point is, it started in other countries. There are multiple countries that have digital IDs. I mean, I can see here we have Estonia, Singapore, India, Sweden. India, interesting. Belgium. So, a direction that I'm happy that we're having conversations on. Not sure the conversation should be with Bill Gates, because I feel Uhuru himself has his own internal political strategy that he's been implementing. But let's see how. Do you think? Would you do it
if it's government initiated?
Kenyan
to be honest,
I think it's better than what we have, even if it's government initiated.
Yes, like I said, there's a certain level of convenience that I think we personally feel is a must, is a bare minimum. I'm trying to find an example, but the fact that I think my ID gives me a little legitimacy in many ways that I interact with the government or with many other areas, that has immense value in and of itself, as opposed to having every single organization have to verify you in some kind of way.
Yeah.
So there's obviously a bare minimum, but the question is, the worst case scenario, what does that look like?
The bad can be bad.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's see how that goes. I think we're about to wrap up this episode. We have 3 minutes on the timer, and I'm just going to give a basic overview of the news that maybe we didn't get to touch upon. We have Momo, which bets on OpenAPI to grow usage of digital wallets in Nigeria. Now, I was talking to Dom about this, and he said this might not be a big story. And I strongly believe it's because of where we are, because mobile money payments are almost efficient here, but in Nigeria this is a big deal because it gives startups or fintechs an opportunity to kind of plug into their APIs. I don't know what their implications might be. I don't know, but there are a lot of things that could come out of this because Momo has over 40 million wallet users in Nigeria, less than 25% of the total wallets, which is about 200 million the company has in Africa. So I think on its road to becoming a bigger monopoly itself, this might be...
It's quite
really interesting.
I think maybe you need to set the stage, in terms of defining, So Momo is MTN's payment service business, payment service provider business. Essentially, it's M-Pesa. It's like M-Pesa it's M-Pesa for MTN, for the Kenyans at least who are watching. And them adopting OpenAPI is just basically them adopting the commonly referred to OpenAPI standards, specifications for guys who want to integrate with their systems and build on top of the ecosystem and things like that. So it is a big, bold move in terms of really trying to get a larger footprint for mobile money, especially in economies where I think MTN is it's available. That's probably the Nigerias and even places our neighbors Uganda, TZ. MTN has a huge footprint. It's serving 200 million plus Africans. And I think on a level of trying to take more African countries to become more digitally enabled in terms of mobile money and cashless payments, that's a really big step forward. I think what this presents to me is that we're just going to have layers of ecosystems on ecosystems. Let's say you want to send funds to someone's Momo account in Nigeria. You're just going to have another ecosystem to have to interface with. Your M-Pesa money has to go through a bank, the bank has to go to a corresponding bank, the other corresponding bank into MTN's Momo ecosystem for the final recipient to actually receive the value. And for me, I see it as a good thing in terms of it's a good thing I think for MTN, especially for taking those economies from cash to more cards and Momo. I think that's a good step, but I still see the same challenges either being added on, layered on, or just being presented a different way in terms of the cost. The cost is still going to be the same. So, but what I can tell you I'm more interested in is actually open banking APIs, because that's not really big in Africa, but it's really big in places like Europe and really big in places like the States, where you actually have control over your transaction data in your bank, and it's yours. It's not the bank's. When you think about it, the transactions you do on your card, those are your transactions. So open banking is actually supposed to be a much bigger deal than what it is right now, because these guys are treating our transaction data as theirs. And there is anyway, time. we can just maybe go off on that on another episode. But
Did you have any thoughts on that, or
not really?
Not really.
Not really.
Okay, well, there you go. I personally think it just means that, again, step ahead for digital wallets, like Dominique has said. It's only 8% in Nigeria of Nigerians that are actually using mobile wallets, even though there are so many that are being built every day. But to me, it just sees that, fintechs are pushing the noise. They're pushing the noise for people to actually start to listen and for users to finally get to that point where they're adapting to some of these.
Actually, I do remember something. Maybe I could mention it when it comes to mobile, what the implication means. And I think I'll lean more towards what Alice was saying, in so much as it's a big thing. Because I remember in university and we were trying to run projects. And so me and a friend of mine were trying to do integration with M-Pesa. And at that time, he was like, the only documentation I got was for soap. And it's like, the integration was such a hard thing.
Please,
for the longest time.
soap, because the soap APIs may not be
So the protocol that systems used to communicate with each other have gone through a lot of refinements because it was hard in between. So we had a number of standards. So there was XML. And then there was SOAP. And now the most common one is like JSON, but it ties more to the open API. So it's a very defined way of system communicating with each other. But at that time, I remember my friend was just telling me how hard it was for him to even try to do all that kind of integration. And yet right now, almost all systems have a way to accept money through M-Pesa payments, and it's automated. You're not confirming with anyone. It's handled through the box. And so perhaps that's what that moment. Perhaps it's not about the payment itself.
It's about the technology,
the ecosystem, and how a rising tide lifts all boats. So it's more about the merchants or someone offering a service being able to tap into that,
inherently tap into the ecosystem.
I agree. All right. As we wrap up this episode, guys, the last piece of news is that there are allegations that Cloud 3.5 Sonnet is better than ChatGPT 4.0, but I will not bring it up right now because people here have lots to say. But these are the kind of conversations that we have on our MTS newsletters that go out every other week as well as monthly.
Subscribe to the newsletter, weekly, monthly, daily.
You'll find it when you subscribe.
It will find you.
It will find you. So just go subscribe at mtsafrica.co/join or click the link in the description. Very happy to have had both of you join me today. I think this conversation has been insightful, more organized than we did have last time. And again, if you've reached this far and you've not subscribed, it is almost a disrespectful act that you are committing. Please just subscribe. We are on the road to 5K. Right now, we are just on the brink of 2K. So I am very happy, honestly, for the progress. We are modifying our website. Very soon, you will be seeing something very fantastic, spectacular, because I'm working with a very amazing Nigerian team that is bringing it to life. But before then, you can just find what is there. You can check out our website at mtsafrica.co. You can follow us on social media platforms, My Tech Story Africa, MTS Africa _ on Twitter, although we are not very active there. You guys want to leave any information, or they will come and find you where they find you?
I will find you.
You can leave a comment down below, and I'll be sure we'll be checking the comments once you engage with us, and I'll be happy to share any information you have with them.
And I will find you.
We're having these roundtables every month, so I will see you guys in the July roundtable. Cheers.
Cheers.
Bye.